Hello everyone, this is Brenda and welcome to Brenda's Bisque tutorial for our September box of Monster Mania. Today we are working on our vampire. And this is our little vampire. So you would have gotten the Bisque in your box. So I'm going to set him aside, and our first job that we need to do is to base coat our vampire. And I'm going to use our Duncan OS 476 black. And if you know how to base coat, you can certainly fast forward through base coating. So I'm going to use a nylon brush, and we use our nylon brushes for painting. You can also use the red sable brushes, the natural hair brush, which work good as well. So I'm using a size 8. It's not a tiny brush that would take forever, and it's just a nice, it's not too big either, because it's not a huge piece. So I'm going to dip my brush in my water and pat it out so that my black paint does not go up into my ferrule of my brush. It'll keep down in the hairs. And I'm going to dab my brush in my black paint, and now I want to just brush back and forth and brush out my paint so I don't have puddles and ridges, and I end up with a nice smooth surface to paint on. And you also want to do your bottoms. So we will do our bottom here quick. And I'm just going to brush my paint out and get our whole piece done in black. And I usually hold on to one end and work my way around. And you can see it dries fairly quickly, but it also dries taking out the brush marks as long as you have the paint brushed out really well. And that makes a nice base for our dry brushing. And we're just going to keep turning him around and brushing out our black paint. Keep dipping in it. Just brush back and forth. Sometimes you have to change the direction of your brushing so you can get in the crevices. Again, make sure your bottom looks nice and neat as well. Just paint back and forth, up and down. Brush out that paint. Like there's a big puddle there, you wouldn't want that. You brush that out nice so you have a nice smooth surface to dry brush on. If you let those big puddles, when you dry brush, the paint is going to stick to those, and they're going to stick out. So you want to make sure you brush out your paint nice. I'm just brushing back and forth, covering the whole thing. Going back and getting any little white spots that may have occurred or popped back up. I need some more black. And you do have to change directions where his hair is and his cap, just so you can get down in there. Sometimes you have to kind of dab instead of actually brushing, but you're still moving all your paint so it's nice and level and no puddles or ridges. So a lot of times I will base coat several pieces, maybe a dozen things. It all depends what I'm working on, so that they can dry and then I'll come back and then start the painting on them, because it's better if your base coat can get a nice drying time in. Then when you're dry brushing, your paint will stick a lot easier and not want to smear. So we're just going to keep working our way around. Brushing out that black paint. You can also base coat in other colors. It does not have to be black. With the Halloween, the dark black and orange, the purples, I do like to use the black. You could use a dark brown, also works. For snowmen, I like to use like a navy blue or a regal purple, or even a dark turquoise color. With something with a lot of flesh color to it, I tend to use more of a medium brown or a brown, so you don't have that stark black against that flesh colors. So you do not have to base coat just in black. You can change those colors out depending upon what you are working on. And we'll just keep brushing away here and getting him all base coated nice. And you have to do dabs and kind of push the paint in little areas where there's a lot of texture, like on his little face. And go back and check where you went before, because you always tend to get little pop-up areas of white. And we'll get down in his eyes and his hair. So you do want a nice base coat so that your dry brushing is nice. So now you can see that there's really no brush marks left where that's dried already. That ceramic coat, or the ceramic paint, is formulated to do that, so it is a better quality paint to use on your ceramics than the box store, the cheaper acrylic paints. If you have all those brush marks when you are dry brushing, they are going to come through. And we're almost to the top here, so I did switch and hold on to him on the bottom. And I'm just grabbing the rest of our black and brushing out our brush, getting any little specks that are coming through. And I need just a little more paint. And just brush it out good. Dab into the areas where you got those little specks that want to come through. And then brush them out. So in the zipper you kind of got to do some dabbing as well, because you tend to get those little white spots coming through. So this would be the same way as if you were painting something out. You would just paint out your different areas of color however you wanted to. You would also use this nylon painting brush or the red sable brush. Get your bottom, come back and inspect him. Make sure you get up in the nostrils. Don't have any white coming through, otherwise once you're dry brushing, that's all going to show. So now we want to look him over. Well, he's drying and he looks pretty good. Hopefully I didn't get him out of screen on you there, because I was getting him closer to me. And you want to look from the top down, because just like that I could see that his pumpkin eyes had white, and the zipper here. So you do have to look at your piece from different angles to make sure that all that white is covered up, because it will be obvious after you're dry brushing that you have those little white specks here and there if they're not. Okay, so I'm just going to look him over again, kind of turn him into different angles so I can see that every little place is covered. And that looks good. So we'll set him aside. And then you always want to wash out your brush. So I have my water bowl with my Harold's brush pad, and I just brush back and forth. I'm real gently. I'm not bearing down on my brush. I'm just being nice and gentle. You want to take care of your brushes so they last a long time. And you can see that all that paint has come out of that brush. And then I'll set that aside, and then I usually take my paper towel and blot my brush and then groom it into a point, and then I set it aside and let it dry. So from that point, and now I do see that I have a white spot in his eye, so we're gonna have to go back and touch that up. So as they dry, you do get those little white specks, and you want to make sure you get rid of every one of them, because they will show through. So hopefully that'll be the last of those. So we'll wash out our brush again and dab it dry again and groom it into its nice point. So now when you're looking at your piece, you're probably wondering where do I start with what? So you want to start with your lower areas, because that's where the when you dry brush the higher areas, it won't get onto the lower areas. If you dry brush your high areas first and then your lower areas, the lower areas are going to get onto your high areas. Now I do know I did this little guy before, and one of the problems was the red with the inside his little coat liner here. So we're actually going to start with that with him first. because I did get the red all over his face. So we're going to start with our rust. And I always use a rust underneath my reds and my oranges. So we have a Doc Holiday DH28, and I just want to shake that up a little bit. And I just need a little pile. It's not going to take a whole lot. And it is quite a small area, so I am going to use a littler brush. Let's see. I'm going to go with the size 1. We use our boar bristle brushes for dry brushing. It's a natural hair brush. Some brushes are stiffer than others. It depends upon the company you get. These are kind of an in-between. They're not too stiff and they're not too soft, so I like those. So I'm just going to touch the edge of my rust with my brush, and I then brush back and forth on my paper, and you can see I got my paper towel. It gets most of the paint out, and then I brush again, and I can see I have just a little bit of rust. So I'm now going to put my rust on that inside part of his little, the liner of his coat, so that it doesn't get all over his face. That was the trouble I had when I painted the sample. I found that it'd be better just to do this rust part first. Otherwise I had done the face first, but then I had rust all over it. So we're going to go with our rust first and our red. So I'm just, there's not a whole lot of room there, so I'm just kind of brushing it towards me, bringing it across the zipper, so I'm keeping that dark black down in there for my shading. And just bringing it out to the edge. And long as we're doing our rust, we can probably go ahead and do our pumpkin. So that is an orange. I would also do that with rust. And again, I'm just going to brush across all my different textures. Don't worry about the teeth. We'll cover those with our white later. Same with the eyeballs. We'll do those with our black later. So I'm just going to brush back and forth. You always want to go across your textures or your crevices. If you go with them, you'll tend to fill them in with color and lose your black. So we do want to try to go across them. And in little spaces like this, it can be a little harder, so you do have to just kind of dab in there. And with our stem, you want to go across the stem so you can leave that black between the stem and the pumpkin. And the same with his fingers here. And it's okay if they get on the fingers. We'll clean that up once we get to the fingers. But the pumpkin is lower than the fingers, so that'll make it easier once we get to the fingers. So I'm just going to keep brushing back and forth. Now I come to where his shirt meets the pumpkin, and I want to go up and down so I can leave that black down in that crevice where the shirt and the pumpkin meet. And I brush out my rust. And as no paint is going on, then I will grab a little bit more. And you're just grabbing a little bit and brushing it out. You're not grabbing a whole lot and wasting it. You only got to moisten that a little bit with that rust. So I'm just touching the edge of it, brushing it out, and then coming to my piece. So we'll brush back and forth here, and you do have to change the angle of your brush depending upon where your different little crevices are. Building up our rust until our pumpkin is covered really nice in our little red part of our coat. And as long as we have it in our brush, we're going to go ahead and put it on our hat because I gave him a red hat. You could switch to a bigger brush here if you wanted to, but we'll just use this. This one will be fine for today. Again, I'm brushing across any of my crevices and texture lines. And leaving those, like where the brim and the hat top meet, you go across those. Where the two hat sections are, you go across those. You want to go across where the hair is, so you let that dark brim color under there. And actually I think we're going to switch to a bigger one so we're not doing it all day. So I'm switching to a size 5, and we'll just get that on there a lot quicker. So you can see that when you have a bigger area, you need to probably switch to a bigger brush. Unless you're not in a rush, you can just keep going with the little one. So we'll just get our hat all rusted up because I like to put my rust under my reds. And you want a nice even coverage. You can see now it's very splotchy, so you wouldn't want that because that's how your red would cover underneath, over the top of that. It wouldn't be a very pretty coverage. It would be splotchy, just like that. So we're just going to build up our rust here. And I'm just brushing back and forth on his hat. Right to the edge. It's okay if you get it on his ears, on his hair. We'll be working on those next. And we'll go back to his pumpkin and let that hat dry a little bit. So you want your base coverage, even of your rust, nice and even, because if you don't have it nice and even, your red is not going to cover even. So that's a little wet, so I got to brush that out. And we want to get under the brim of his hat. Try to brush across his ear so you can keep that shading there. Get the pumpkin a little bit and let the hat dry. And we'll brush back and forth here. Just brushing back and forth across any textures, crevices, your sections of your pumpkin. Just back and forth. You can see he's getting to be orange now instead of rust. And the orange goes on real nice with that rust underneath it. Builds up real quick. And we'll get a little bit more on. Just going across any texture, just brushing back and forth. And from the hot orange, we will go to our Dunkin' Bisque stain, our OS 438 orange peel. And we'll give that a little shake and grab just a little bit. And using the same brush, I will touch my orange peel, brush it out on my paper towel. Do that a couple times so I get my color changed out a little bit. So now I just want to touch the center of like each section of my pumpkin just to highlight it a little bit. That's where more of the light would be hitting, is on those center panels. And back here we kind of don't have real panels, but we'll kind of imagine that he does and kind of make our own. And right around the top, because more light would be hitting there. So now we have a nice little orange pumpkin. A little bit more on his face here. So we have a nice orange pumpkin, so we'll put those aside. So from there we are going to go to our blues. So his face is very blue. So we'll start with our navy blue. So I have my Dunkin' OS 460 navy. We'll also do his pants because they were started with the navy as well. So I'll get a little pile of navy here. And then I'm not going to go with a real huge brush because it's kind of a small area, so I have my size 3 boar bristle brush. You can use round or flat. I have round because I already had blue in that one. So now we're just going to dry brush on his little face and on his ears. It's okay if you get it on his hair because we'll touch that up last. That's the hair is higher than the face, so that's why we'll do the hair last. So I'm just going to brush back and forth here over the edge of his face and his ears. We got to get those back to being darker because we have the red on there from the hat, but it was just easier to do the red in that inside of his coat there, so that's why we did that rather than having to try to get the red with his face all done because that was harder. I already did it like that. So So you're gonna have to turn him around, and we'll do our little strokes here to get down in his ears and not get it all over our blue, our navy all over our pumpkin. Grab my navy and brush it out. Start in his face and work towards the edge of that coat, leaving a little black in the crevice there for your shading. And these are just little C strokes, and you just start away and work over to your red. Leaving that black deep down in there. That's what's going to give him his nice shading for his face. Work it right over to his ear and up around his eyes and hair. Grab a little more. Then his hair starts right here, so we have to get just a little bit further here. So if you start away and then work up to where you want that black remaining in the crevice, that's the easiest way to do it without getting it all over the place. Because if I did big long strokes like that, I would have that navy all over my red and all over my pumpkin. So I want to, his ear comes around the back, so we want to get his ear as well. And we just do those little strokes too, so we don't get our hat all full of red. And we'll have to kind of turn him here, start away, work towards the ear. Start in the ear and work towards the hair. Just little bitty strokes, and you can just slowly build up that navy color right on his ear, right up to the hair and to the hat. And let's see, we have an ear on this side, so we got to get our ear on this side as well, and we'll just do the same thing. Start away from the ear and work, just nudge your brush towards the hair and to the hat, and then to the pumpkin. Trying not to get it all full of the navy. So you don't want to be doing those big full strokes, you just want to do little strokes and build it up. And you want to have a little brush so you can get down in those little areas. Get under his chin a little bit, but leave some of that black down in there for shading. Come over here by his other ear, make sure you got a good coat on that. Check the other one again. All right, so we got his little face all pretty and blue. So now we'll go to our navy and we'll go down on our pants here. So his shoes are lower than his pants, but we're gonna have those in black, so we'll just go right ahead with our navy on our pants. Again, going across to your center, leave that black down in the crevice, and then from the pants down to the shoe, so we're letting that darkness down over the shoe, because that would be darker down there. And we can just brush ourselves right around the corner here. Again, brush back and forth over that center where the two pants legs meet. You can brush back and forth right up to the coat, where the coat meets the pants, kind of leave that black down in that crevice. That'll be good shading for where the coat and the pants meet. Again, I'm just brushing down over the shoe. That lets that darkness down under the pants between the shoe. And you just want a nice even coat of your navy all the way around on his pants if you wanted blue jeans. And we'll get this one more time around, and then I think the blue is good. So that looks pretty good to me. All right, now we will go to our medium blue. So we have our Duncan Bisque OS 457 medium blue, and we're just going to shake that up a little bit and get another drop of the medium blue. And using the same brush, I'm going to go into my medium blue a few times and brush it out. I'm going to actually start on my pants because I want those to be darker than his face. I'm just going to brush back and forth real lightly. I'm not brushing real hard. And that's going to kind of give him a blue jean look. I'm letting it darker navy and the black up closer to the coat there, because that would be darker, the coat's over the top of your pants, so it's gonna give shading. So just bring it right around. Just brush back and forth. You can go up and down a little bit because it would be lighter at the bottom of his pants. And grab a little more and brush it out. And just keep coming right around. So you can make these as dark or as light as you would like. It doesn't, they can be as dark of blue jeans or light of blue jeans as you'd like. These are kind of in between looking guys. They do let it darker in between his legs and underneath the coat though. That's what gives us all that nice shading and gives our piece nice dimension. So we worked it right around and that looks pretty good. And now we'll go to his face with that same medium blue and the same brush. We're just going to brush, get him a nice blue face here. Not sure why his face is blue, but we're going to go with it. And dab a little bit on his ears, just slowly build that up. Come around his hair. Just brush slowly and gently so you don't get it all over. Brush across his hairline, and his forehead and his nose. Don't worry about getting it in his eyes. That's alright because we got to paint those yet anyway. So you can see that paint in that brush goes a long ways. So I'm going to start on his nose there because I do want that lighter. And then we'll just keep working it out. And we'll turn him so we can get his ears. And you want to do nice little strokes in there so you don't get your pumpkin all full. If you do, you can always go back and touch it up. So we're just doing our nice little strokes, bringing it down to the neckline where it meets the red of the liner. And you kind of got to tip that head so you can get that brush down in there. And we want to work right around to his ears. We want to be careful not to get it on his hat, but if we get it on his hair, that's okay. We'll be able to touch that up with the black later. And just do those little padding type strokes, and you can work that blue in there right where you want it. And we'll do the same thing here in front of the ear, leaving just a little bit of black between the hat and the ear. Grab a little more, brush it out. And we kind of want him a little bit lighter yet. He's kind of dark yet. So you just keep building up your blue till you have him the color that you want him to be. So I got him pretty light, so we'll go probably a whole shade lighter yet here. And just keep building it up, going from one side to the other. So you really don't want a lot of the black left on the face. You really just want it in those crevices and creases. You want to get it in his ears here. And we also want to get the back of that ear, so you got to make sure you turn him and get the tip of that ear and just do those gentle little strokes, and it'll slowly build up your medium blue. Leaving your navy and your black for your highlighting, or not your highlighting, your shadowing. And get the tip of the ear. And just keep going with those little strokes and those little brush. That's probably your best friend when it comes to these little detailed pieces, those little brushes. Like your 1s and your 3s. The flat brushes too, you can also turn on your side so they're kind of multi-purposeful. You can get even skinnier areas out of them by turning them on their end. So I'm just brushing it along the edge of his face down towards the red liner of his coat. Just want a nice even looking blue on the ears as well. And we'll just keep a little bit more yet, I think, because we have some black coming through that blue, and I'd really like it to be more blue with just the black down in the shaded areas. Let's get in there. Okay. So now we're going to go to our baby blue, our Duncan OS 456, our baby blue. We're going to shake that up and get a little drop of that. And I've got to shake it a little more. So our drop is probably like 1/4 of a teaspoon. We're not using a lot of paint, so we don't want to waste it. So I just dabbed into my blue with that baby blue with that same blue brush it out on my paper towel. And now I'll start on his pants. I just want to highlight the edges a little bit because the light would be hitting that bottom edge just a little bit more. So we're just going to go real lightly on about the bottom 1/4 inch just to give it another shade of color to it, like the moonlight might be shining on him. I'm just brushing back and forth real lightly, making my way around. Right on the edge of his pants, like I said, about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch up. And then that medium blue starts, and then we got our navy that's closer up to the top there. And then I'll do just one little light layer at the top part too, but it's very light, just to carry that color up a little bit. I'm just brushing really lightly just to even it out a little bit. And we'll get a little more on the bottom here, I think. And go one more time around the bottom. So there we go. Now we're going to go back into our baby blue. And we want to highlight him just a little bit, so he's not quite as blue. Get him just a little bit lighter here with our baby blue. And we'll just put it on just like we did the other two colors. Just brush along his hairline and on his ears. Just bring that color up a little bit more. Brush it out really well. Go over his teeth, don't worry about that. We'll be painting those black later, or white later. Just work it around, leaving those darker colors closer to the bottom and where it would be shaded. So I'm just kind of doing my little half circles or a little backwards C-stroke, or comma stroke I should say. So we want to come and get just a little bit on the back side of those ears. Even though a whole lot of light wouldn't be shining there, I don't want him quite that dark of a blue. And we'll get the other ear as well. And you don't really want to see brush strokes, you just want nice, even, smooth coverage. So you can touch real light and build up that color. So when I get in this ear and avoid that pumpkin, I'm just going real light. I want him a little bit lighter yet, I think. Especially like on his cheeks where the light, like say the moonlight, would be hitting him really good. And on his nose and on his forehead, around his eyes here. And the top of those ears. But I'm letting it darker underneath his whole chin area there because that would be all shaded up under there. So get a little more on those ears, a little more on the forehead, and I'm just going back and forth, around and around, just building up a nice even shade of blue on his face. And I think one more time. And get a little bit on those ears yet. And a little more on the face, just a little bit shade lighter. Especially on the tip of his nose here and his chin and his cheeks. And I think the forehead there too. Okay, so he's looking pretty good with his blue, long as it's nice and even. I think I need a little more over here. There we go. Just want a nice even coat. A little more on those cheeks and that nose. Okay, so that's good. So the next would be doing our We have his little pants done, so now we need to go on to his coat. So we need our grays. We're going to use charcoal first. So we have our Duncan OS 475 charcoal. And that'll take a little bit of a puddle for that because a little bit bigger area. And since it's also a bigger area, we're going to go to a little bit bigger brush. I'm going to use my size 5 flat here. And I'll touch my gray and brush it out. And you can see I brush out again and it's nice and dry brush. So now I just want to brush across all my textures here. And crevices and where the clothes meet up. We will get a little bit on our zipper. It'll just make the silver color cover a little better. So we still got a little bit of blue on our red, but we can go back and touch that up. You want to be more careful when you're over here by the pumpkin so you don't get that all full of the gray. So I'm going to just brush back and forth. And then I can, even though it's a bigger brush, I can start away and do those little backwards comma strokes and gradually work it up to the edge of the coat so I can see where his little coat ends and the pumpkin starts. Now we did miss his little hand, so we'll have to go back and do that once we're done with the coat. So I kind of forgot about his little hand being back there, but that's alright. We'll just bring the gray right up to his hand and brush back and forth across the crevice where the sleeves and the body of the coat meet. And we want to get our collar on our coat here. And I'm actually letting the top edge of it kind of with the black pretty much. I'm just touching the top edge of it to get the black or the gray on it. The charcoal, I should say. And then I'm going across where the collar and the body of the jacket meet, and then across our sleeves. So you just want to look at each little area and try to brush across them and not with them. And this is a big area, so I can take these bigger brush strokes without worrying too much. But then when I get up here by his little head and the pumpkin, I got to be more careful. Just take littler strokes, or you can also switch to a littler brush. So we'll just keep working our way around. That way this area is drying as we come back around, and we can touch it back up again. So I just have to take these little strokes because now we're coming to where the red and the gray are going to meet for the liner. So sometimes you can do bigger strokes and sometimes you have to do littler strokes. It all depends on your piece and where you're at on it and what size brush you have. So we got this big area here, so I can do some really big brushing and get it done kind of quickly. And I'm just holding the top and the bottom with my hand here, the other hand, and just keep turning him around and working from one side to the other. So we can kind of see where our red needs to stop there. So we'll just touch real gently with our gray and work that right up to the red, kind of right up to the zipper here. Same on the other side. And get down in the armpit here and come across the front. Go across the arm and the front of the coat so you can keep that nice black shading down in the crevice there. And we'll come over to the other sleeve, and we got a little bit of orange on it yet, so we just have to come up just a little bit further with our gray. And you can switch to a smaller brush if you're more comfortable with that. And we'll get the bottom part here. So you can see the gray goes on pretty quick with this bigger brush, but I'm still trying to brush across all my crevices wherever clothing parts meet or body parts meet. To be careful where the pumpkin meets And now I want to actually turn him upside down so we can get our gray going underneath our edge of our coat here a little bit. And we won't go all the way, but we'll go pretty far, maybe about 1/8 of an inch, and leaving our black because that would be nice shading under there. And then bring it out to the edge of the coat, and then just work your way around. And then you would have more heavier gray on the actual edge of the coat, and then it'll get less gray and less gray as it goes underneath there because it would be getting darker from less light being under there. Just like it is with his little arm. There's more shading where there's more ruffle of clothing. So we're just going to do the same thing all the way around the back. You just kind of want to have it equal distance all the way around. And then bring it up onto the front of the coat and have that more solid. And you can come right up on his collar. So it's pretty much all gray or the charcoal, not a whole lot of black showing through, just where those crevices are. Again, that was one of the hardest things for me to learn, was how much paint to dry brush on, and that was one of the things I seemed to never have enough to get them to turn out the way I envisioned them to turn out. So you're really covering up a lot of that base coat and just letting it down in your creases and crevices for the shading. So we're just going to bring this right around. And we'll get underneath here. And we're going to flip him back around so we can look at him from another angle. And it looks like we need a little more around his collar here and on the back. So there's very little black showing through the big major parts. It's mainly where anything meets, because that's where there would be shading. There would be darkness, less light. So there we go. We have our gray on, our charcoal on. So now we are going to go to our gray, if I can find it. Okay, we have our ash. I have OS 567 ash. And we'll give that a little shake, and we need a smaller pile of that than we did the charcoal. And again, we'll use the same brush for the gradual change of color. And just dip it in there and brush it out. And you can make his coat whatever shade of gray you want it. I kind of went pretty light. So we'll just get a nice shade of our ash on here. And I'm just brushing just like I did with the charcoal. I'm going to brush careful by the red so you don't get it all over it and onto the zipper here. And we're going to want more of the ash on the highlighted areas, which is the higher areas, like the front of the zipper here and the front of the coat and the collar, because more light would be hitting that, and on the top of his arms. And just brush back and forth. Brush across the front. So I'm leaving it a little bit more charcoal down in there because that would be darker down in there. And then I'm only going to come right to the edge of my jacket where it starts to go underneath, because it would get darker as it's going underneath there. So we're going to let that darker. Now this front of this sleeve here would be lighter because there'd be more light hitting it. And we'll just keep working our way around with our ash. Grabbing it and brushing it out on the paper towel, and then brush it out on your piece. Being careful up here by the pumpkin again. And we want to get some on his collar because the light would be hitting that really good. And And here we got this big area, so we can do some nice big strokes. We want it kind of right through the center. It can be darker as it gets closer to the crevice, that's all right. So I'm going to grab some more ash and dip my brush and brush it out. And just get a nice even coat of ash on here on our highlighted areas. And then on our collar edge. And just work right around. So when we come back around, that front part will be dry and we can actually do one more coat. So I want a little more on the top of those sleeves because that would be brighter, because the light would be hitting that. Top of his pocket here where his hand's in his pocket. Top of our collar here. And just a little bit more. And then I want to take him and flip him down because I want to bring my ash just about 1/4 of an inch in from the edge in, because a little bit of light would be shining underneath there, lighting up that edge of that coat, but not all the way under it. So we want to let a lot of the charcoal and just get the edge about 1/4 inch and then towards the front with our ash. And that just gives your piece lots of dimension when you have those shades of color like that. And we can brush it out pretty good here because we got lots of room. And we'll keep coming right on around. And we just keep going with that about 1/4 inch underneath, and then leaving the rest with the ash and the charcoal and the black. Get a little more on his arm there, and we'll meet these guys up. So just a little bit of light would be going underneath. And then there would be a lot on top here, so we'll make sure we have a lot on top. And that looks pretty good. So now we will go to our gray, our OS 474 gray, and we'll just highlight it a little bit more on our edges. And I'm going to use the same brush, dip in my gray for that gradual color change. And now I want to think about where the light would really be hitting. Say the moonlight would be really hitting his coat. It's going to be on all these high spots. And we're just going to lighten it up just a little bit more. Be on his arm here. Kind of right through the front. And you could make this a lot lighter if you wanted to as well. It's totally up to you. There's no rights or wrong. Do what you like. So just build up our gray here a little bit. We want to be careful by our pumpkin. You can see I haven't dipped in my gray at all because that's in that brush, and you just keep dry brushing it out until it's nothing coming out, like about now, and we'll grab a little more and work our way around. And just keep turning him. So now the top of our collar would have a lot of light on it, so we want to make sure we have that nice and light. So we'll get a little extra gray on there and then bring it down. Whoop, and when you have too much like that, you can actually take it and dab it off. And then you want to brush that brush out because that was a little more than I wanted. So now we'll have to even out our coat color here to get it more to match with that so it ain't too spotty. So we'll just keep brushing it till it's nice and even looking. and kind of matches that color, so we'll have to make it a little bit lighter. So grab a little more and brush it out, and then we'll just work our way around and come back around again so we can get it lighter, because that was probably not as light as I wanted it, but then you kind of have to, if you get too much paint, you kind of adjust. So we'll get his collar a little bit whiter here on top now. Bring it around. So get a little more light on the front here. We're just taking it right, we'll flip it around here, and now we'll do just the edge. Just get that lightness on the edge. Oh, I'm getting paint in one spot here. So I'm just getting it right where it starts to curl under just a little bit, just getting that gray on there, because that's where a lot of the light would hit if it was, like, say the moonlight was shining on it. And we'll bring that right around. And get our front to match our back. You don't really want to see brush marks. You just want nice, smooth, even color, and you have to do that by little layers at a time. And if you're doing more than that, it's probably more of a wet brushing technique than a dry brushing technique, which there's nothing wrong with that either. So we're going to flip him back around and get the top here. And we'll work him back around till he looks nice and even. He was a little bit blotchy over here, so we're gonna see if we can get that evened out. So now we're at the point where we can touch up our black. So I'm just going to use my #1 flat liner so I can turn it on its edge. Grab some black, brush it out. And now I want to touch up my black, and I want to bring it right up to my pants. And we'll do this all the way around. So wherever any blue got on your black, it just makes it nice and neat. And we'll keep coming around here. And then we can check out his hair and see where we need to get some black on there to touch that up between the hat and the collar here. Just use your, you can turn your brush on its edge, and that will help give you a little more control, as well as on his little face here. We'll just touch it up a little more. I see a little more blue coming through here yet. I'm trying to get close to his ear without getting his ear all full. And then we can put that aside, and now I'm going to grab my liner, and we are going to work on our eyes. So I'm going to dip into my paint and just make a little puddle. So I dipped it in the water and then into my paint, and I'm making a little puddle of ink type black, ink consistency black, so I can paint my black eyes. So we will just follow the indents for the eyes on the pumpkin from the mold. And you want to anchor your hand on the table really well, holding your piece, and then anchor your painting hand onto your piece so you can get a nice straight line. And we'll do the other one as well. And you just got to keep turning them so you can get all at the different little angles. And we'll grab some paint and we'll go into our eyes, and we'll start up here at 11 and bring it around to 1. This is my basic eye. It was the instructions that were in last month's subscription Bisque box. It's also the eye video with the piggy bank eye on YouTube and on Facebook. So you could follow that along either way. So we're just going to outline that eye. I like to do that outline part first instead of last. A lot of people will do that last. I like to do it first. It can be hard to get an equal spaced line if you do it first, or do you do it last? For me, it was always hard to do that. So I do it this way. I'm sure that other people have other ways of doing eyes, but this is the way that works for me, so just do what works for you. And I don't worry about what the center looks like. We're just focused on what that outside line of that eye looks like. So now we need that to dry for a minute. I'm going to wash out my brush. And I need a little pile of white. That's baby blue. And we're going to put the whites in the eye. And we just need a little drop. And again, I'm going to dip my brush in my water and add that drop of water to the corner. And mix that up. And I see I got some black on my brush, so I'm going to wipe that out. And we'll mix this up so it's the consistency of ink. It just makes it easier to paint with that. The paint will flow really well. We'll start with our little fangs over here on our pumpkin. And because the paint is thinner, you may need an extra coat to cover up the darker areas. But you can see it flows really nice when you're trying to paint those little areas. And you can see I'm also resting my piece on the table. I'm holding him nice and snug. I got my painting hand rested on my piece. That's probably your biggest tip as far as getting steady painted lines. Just resting those two pieces and having good control of your piece and your brush. I'm drawing the brush towards me usually. Instead of pulling it away, it's easier to pull it towards you when you're painting. So we have his little fangs done. So now we're going to go to our eyes because our black is dried. I always usually start with the left one instead of the right so that I'm not putting my fingers into wet paint, because I'm always resting on here. And we're going to go from about the 11 o'clock to the 1 o'clock position with our white. We're going to leave our black line as wide or as thick as we want that black outline. That's kind of up to you. You just want it kind of equal all the way around. And again, you can see I have a good hold of him and I'm resting my painting hand on him. So it's getting a little wide, so we're going to kind of bring it down there a little bit. So you're just focusing on where your white is meeting the black outline of your eye, having a nice, straight, equal spaced black line left. Don't worry about that center part because the blue is going to cover that up. We're just worried about where the outside line is. So I have a nice, equal spaced white line around the outside of my eye. So now we're going to do the other side. Again, from about 11 o'clock around to 1 o'clock. And I start in and I merge over to the 1 o'clock. That way I can see how wide that black is that's left on the outside there. Starting in, merging out. And then hook those two up. So now this is I'm using the Fibo Liner, the detail liner, which was the extra in our anniversary box in July. So anyone that had that box, you also have this brush to use. So it's a good little eye brush. So I'm just touching this up a little bit because I want just get it a little bit more even with my black that's around the outside. And just a little bit thicker with my white because it's thin. Sometimes it takes just a little extra layer. So I'm not worried about that inside how ugly that inside of that eye looks. Don't worry about that. Worry about that where the white and the black are meeting, so that you have a nice even black outline to your eye. And now I can come back over here and touch up my fangs. Just get another little bit more white on there. And on this one. And we're not going to do those fangs until we're done with our eyes. So I washed out my brush. Now I'm going to dip it in there again, thin out my medium blue, so it's kind of like ink. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start up at, make sure your paint is dry. We're going to go from about 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, but I want a crescent shaped white area on the bottom, so it'll be starting from about 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. But starting up here at the 11 o'clock and in the eye a little bit, I can get started. And now where the white and the black meet, I can have my blue meet at about 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then bring it over to the 3. Same at the 1 o'clock here, I can come down and then come in at about 3 o'clock and join these up. So I have that nice white crescent of white on the bottom. I'm not worried about that ugly blue in the middle. If it's all jaggedy, that's fine. We're just worrying about now where our white and blue meet. We want that to look good because the inside will get covered up with the black. So we'll come back over to this other eye and do the same thing. Start over at the 11 and merge over. About 9 o'clock, start your crescent of your white. Come in on 1 o'clock over here and then come down to about 3 and start your crescent for your white on that side. And you can make sure you have enough blue. So now I want to look at these. I want to see that my inside blues are at the same position. So this one's a little bit higher than this one. So I'm going to bring this one down a little bit more. So I'm just going to come just a little bit further down where my white starts. And now I'm going to brush my paintbrush out. I'm going to grab my black. Make sure that's dry. And now we can outline our rest of our top of our eye here, kind of starting at 1 and going over to the other side. And we can cover up that ugliness and kind of make a crescent shaped blue part, leaving as much blue as you want. And then come over here on the other side and do the same thing. And then fill it in. So it's a little wet yet, so I'm going to let it sit for a second. And we'll come to the other eye and do the same thing. And make my blue crescent. And go to the other side. I just want to make sure my black kind of looks the same on both sides. But I'm always resting that painting hand on my painting piece or on the table. So you can see the right side looks pretty good. The left side needs to match up to this right side, so we got to do a little touch up over here. So we're just going to bring that down a little bit more. So it's a pretty good liner brush for that. Works pretty good. So I want to look at it. I want my inside blue and white to compare on each side as well as on the outside. So my blue is up a little bit on the outside of this one, so I'm going to just bring my black down a little bit more. And that's pretty good, so I'll wash out my brush. We'll go to our white, and we'll get our fangs white over here. And we'll get the other one white while our eye is drying before we put our white highlights in it. And then we just have our silver zipper to do. So we'll put some little white dots in our eyes, and I'll just touch straight down with my brush, or you can use your ball stylus. Put them both at about 1 o'clock so he's not cross-eyed. Try to get them both about the same size. So now our black is drying. I got to get a little bit of water in my white just to thin it out a little bit here. And we can do our little commas in each eye. I usually do those at about 1 o'clock. Push down, pull and lift, and that'll give you a nice comma. And do the same on the other one. And then you can put a dot at the top using your brush or a ball stylus. And they both are on the same side of the eye so they don't look cross-eyed. I can take my brush now and make a X in each little corner if you wanted a little bit more of a highlight. And kind of have a rounded curve to your X. It'll make it the eye look more rounded. Put a dot in the top left of each X, and you have a nice highlighted eye there. You want that dot smaller than the top dot in the comma. Now we're going to grab some Dunkin' Ultra Metallics UM956, which is our silver for our zipper. And it's only going to take a drop. Whoop, and I dipped in the white. We don't want to do that. I want silver. And I'm just going to brush with my liner brush where that silver zipper is, kind of letting the black down in the depth, because that'll just gives your piece more, just gives the zipper more look to it. I don't want it completely solid with silver. I do want that black left down in the creases. So I'm just touching the top of my zipper pieces with the brush. And you kind of want it nice and even, both sides kind of the same thickness. And we can paint his little zipper tab here. And we'll get a little bit more, and we'll just lightly touch right down the center here and get less and less as you get down to the bottom, but just a little bit in there so you can see that there's a little shiny zipper in there. And that looks pretty good. So now I do notice that I have some gray on my red, so I'm going to grab my real red. So you may have to touch up here and there a little bit, and I'm just going to use, I washed out my liner, I'm just going to use my little liner, and I'm going to see if I can touch up this red a little bit. If we would have done that last, we would have had a lot of red all over his face. It was just really made a mess out of it. I did that the first time. And on this side we got a little bit of our gray, and we also got a little bit of our silver on the liner part there, so we're gonna touch that up a little bit, and my silver wasn't quite dry right there. So we'll just bring our red right up to our edge of our zipper, and it still ain't dry. So let's give it a second. We can come down to this part. So it ain't quite dry, but it's gonna work. So there we go, we got our red touched up. Now I do see there's a little bit of blue on my red, so I'm actually gonna take my red and thin it out with the water. So it's not so stark. And I'll take my little liner brush and just run it right along the edge. And because it's watered down, I can cover up the blue, but it won't be a real bright red. It'll look like it kind of belongs because it's kind of a thinned out red, and that's one way you can touch up your little colors like that, is if you really thin that paint out to like a watercolor consistency, and then just go right next to your little where the black and the blue and the red meet, and just go with your red and that will touch that right up. So let's see if our silver's dry here now on the top. And we got then touch that up. So there he goes. He's looking really good. So now I would take him and I would seal him with my matte sealer. So he's not shiny. And then I would take my gloss sealer, which I had a little while ago. And where did I put it? Let's see, gloss sealer, where'd you go? I'm not seeing my gloss sealer. Oh, it's on the bottom of the cart. You will have gloss sealer in your box in the little pots, but we did include it last year, I think, in our October box. So after you seal it with your matte aerosol sealer, you can take your matte sealer and then your little liner brush and paint the little fangs, the little teeth with the matte sealer, and that'll make them shiny like there's real teeth, nice and shiny and fierce looking. So we'll just put a little matte sealer on those guys, and then you can also do that on the eyes. What?
Gloss sealer.
Oh, sorry, gloss. It's the gloss sealer. And we can also do that on his eyes. And you could do this on any eyes, animal eyes, fingernails, toenails, claws. It just gives them a more real look to them. And it does go on cloudy, but it does dry clear. And we have one more thing to do. And I need goldenrod for our pumpkin eyes. So it looks like he's got a candle glowing in him. So I have my goldenrod OS 491, and I'm just going to use my little nylon or liner again. And we're just going to run some goldenrod underneath his eyes where that would be cut out in the pumpkin, and then it'll look like it's glowing from the inside with a light. And you would have wanted to do this before you sealed it. I just noticed that we missed that. So you could put this goldenrod in the pumpkin's eyes before you put your aerosol sealer on it. But you can see that adds a light. It just makes the pumpkin look like he's actually lit up. So our eyes are cloudy now because they have the gloss sealer on them, but they will dry clear. I have to straighten out my pumpkin eyes here with the black because I got goldenrod all over it. So that is our cute little vampire. Now if you wanted, you could blush the cheeks with some cotton candy pink or with your pink chalk. But otherwise, that's our vampire for our Brenda's Bisque box Monster Mania for September. So I hope you enjoyed your video today. Thank you.